Forget the headlines, forget the lists of today's billionaires. If you think black wealth began with celebrity paychecks, NBA contracts, or Silicon Valley startups, you've been sold a shallow story. The real history of black wealth in America is older, deeper, and far more dangerous. These weren't overnight success stories. These were dynasties forged under the boot of a system designed to erase them. They rose in eras when one wrong glance could ruin you, when law and violence worked hand in hand to keep you out. And yet, they didn't just get in. They built shipping empires without the blessing of Wall Street. They bought entire city blocks when no bank would lend to them. They mastered real estate, manufacturing, finance, politics, all in a country that wanted them invisible. Their names should be carved next to Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rockefeller. But history tried to bury them. Newspapers of their day covered their business triumphs in whispers, their political victories in one-line mentions, and their philanthropy, if at all, as curiosities. The truth is this: these men and women weren't just rich, they were dangerous to the order of things. Their wealth meant independence. Independence meant influence. And influence was the one thing the old guard feared most. This is not a history lesson, this is a reckoning. Because if you've never heard of the Fortens, the Churches, the Bruces, the Leidesdorffs, it's not by accident. It's because the blueprint they left behind still works. And it all begins with a boy in colonial Philadelphia, one of the few born free, who would prove that loyalty, innovation, and vision could turn a craft into a fortune, and a fortune into a weapon. James Forten's story doesn't begin with poverty. It begins with a rarity: freedom. Born in 1766 in Philadelphia, a city still simmering with revolutionary energy, Forten entered life already defying the odds stacked against black Americans of the era. At 14, when most boys were apprenticed quietly into trades, Forten was already staring down British cannons. Serving aboard the privateer Royal Louis, he was captured in battle and taken prisoner. His captors offered him a comfortable life in England. Forten refused without hesitation. His loyalty belonged to the fragile, untested idea of an independent America. After the war, he apprenticed in sailmaking, a trade that fueled global commerce. But Forten wasn't content to follow the patterns of his mentor. He innovated, redesigning sails for greater speed and maneuverability. Word spread quickly across Atlantic trade routes. A Forten sail meant an edge over competitors. By 1798, Forten had bought the sail loft outright. Under his leadership, it became one of Philadelphia's most profitable businesses, his income reaching into what would now be millions. But for Forten, money wasn't an end. It was a lever. He turned his home into an abolitionist command center. He financed anti-slavery publications. His property became a stop on the Underground Railroad. And when his children married, they joined other activist families, creating a multi-generational web of influence that extended far beyond business. Forten proved that innovation could be a weapon, and wealth could be armor in the fight for justice. His was the first of many black fortunes that rewrote the rules. But decades later, in another part of America, a man would build his fortune not from invention, but from the ashes of a city that had once tried to erase him. Robert Reed Church was never supposed to be a power in Memphis. Born in 1839 to an enslaved mother and a white riverboat captain, he began life straddling two worlds, belonging fully to neither. By the time he reached adulthood, he had mastered the brutal rhythms of the Mississippi River trade, learned how to navigate white hostility, and understood the value of land in a growing city. But none of that prepared him for the night the city tried to erase him. In 1866, racial violence boiled over into the Memphis Massacre. A white mob stormed his saloon, shooting him, looting the business, and leaving him for dead. Most men would have run. Church made a vow: if this city wanted me gone, I would own it instead. When yellow fever struck in the 1870s and the city emptied in terror, property prices collapsed. Where others saw a graveyard, Church saw an open market. He bought block after block, storefronts, homes, and prime commercial plots for pennies on the dollar. By the time Memphis recovered, he had become one of its most powerful landlords, earning the modern equivalent of hundreds of thousands in monthly rent. But Church's vision extended beyond profit. He built Church's Park, a cultural haven for black residents barred from white-only spaces, and founded Solvent Savings Bank to give black entrepreneurs access to capital they'd never had. Church turned violence into victory, but his calculated rise would be overshadowed in sheer ruthlessness by a man who ruled the financial capital of America and was feared by its richest tycoons. On Wall Street, power moved in whispers and deals sealed behind cigar smoke. Into that world stepped Jeremiah G. Hamilton, a black financier who didn't just challenge the white titans of finance, he beat them, and they hated him for it. His rise began with scandal in Haiti, where a counterfeit coin scheme nearly cost him his life. Returning to New York, he dove into the chaotic, cutthroat markets of the mid-1800s. Hamilton's genius was disaster investing. When companies collapsed, from fires, storms, or corruption, he swooped in, bought shares for pennies, then forced insurance payouts at full value. It was ruthless, it was brilliant, and it earned him the fury of Cornelius Vanderbilt himself. Their battles became Wall Street legend, and more often than not, Hamilton came out ahead. At his peak, his fortune reached $2 million, over $50 million today. He lived in a New Jersey mansion, married a white woman, and owned shares in railroads that barred him from riding their cars. For Hamilton, wealth wasn't comfort, it was a weapon. But while he waged war in the stock market, another figure was quietly mastering the art of building power the old-fashioned way, brick by brick. They called her the most successful black woman in New York, a title Elizabeth Gloucester earned one deed at a time. Born free in Virginia in 1817, she married Reverend James Gloucester and moved north. While her husband became a respected pastor, Elizabeth quietly built her empire. She focused on boarding houses, but not the overcrowded, bare-bones kind. Her properties catered to well-off white tenants willing to pay top rates for refinement, order, and comfort. Her standards were legendary: immaculate rooms, attentive service, and strict rules that attracted a clientele who valued exclusivity. Word spread, and soon her holdings spanned more than a dozen prime properties across Brooklyn, worth millions in today's money. But Gloucester's influence didn't stop at real estate. Her home became a safe haven for fugitive slaves and a meeting place for abolitionists. Her fortune funded anti-slavery publications and helped bankroll John Brown's ill-fated raid on Harper's Ferry. By the time of her death, her estate was valued at $500,000, a staggering figure for the time and possibly even higher than records suggested. She left behind more than property deeds. She left a blueprint for how wealth could be both shield and sword. In the dawning 20th century, two other women would take that lesson and scale it to heights no one had imagined, transforming beauty into an industry that would touch millions of lives. The air in St. Louis carried the scent of pressing oils and ambition when Annie Turnbow Malone set up her small operation. She wasn't just making hair care products, she was rewriting the rules of beauty. Her Poro formulas were a revelation, nourishing rather than damaging, avoiding the harsh chemicals that left women's hair brittle and burned. Malone knew the science and saw the gap in the market, but more importantly, she understood distribution. Without access to major retail shelves, she built her own network of trained agents. They went door to door, delivering live demonstrations and earning trust in communities that traditional advertising ignored. Soon, Malone's empire expanded into Poro College, part factory, part training ground, part cultural hub. More than 75,000 agents learned not just to sell, but to build their own customer bases. Malone's fortune grew into the equivalent of hundreds of millions today, but her greatest impact was in the independence she gave to thousands of black women, turning them into business owners in their own right. And from within her ranks, one young woman would emerge, ambitious, relentless, and ready to build an empire of her own. Sarah Breedlove had worked as a laundress, earning barely $1 a day before learning the beauty trade under Annie Turnbow Malone. But she had a vision that couldn't be contained within someone else's brand. Reinventing herself as Madam C.J. Walker, she launched her own line of products and unleashed a marketing strategy that was part showmanship, part community empowerment. Her Walker agents were more than salespeople. They were ambassadors of beauty and financial freedom, spreading the brand from city to city. Walker didn't just sell products, she sold transformation. Demonstrations in parlors, church basements, and community halls became events. Her training schools turned out not just stylists, but entrepreneurs. By 1919, Walker was celebrated as America's first self-made female millionaire. Her estate, Villa Lewaro, stood among the mansions of industrial barons, a silent, undeniable rebuttal to the idea that black women couldn't belong in the highest tiers of American wealth. While Walker conquered the world of beauty, on the far edge of the continent, another man was laying the foundations, quite literally, for a city that would become one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in America. Before gold fever swept California, before the railroads and the rush, San Francisco was little more than a sleepy port called Yerba Buena. William Alexander Leidesdorff saw more than a harbor. He saw the bones of a metropolis. A skilled sea captain of Afro-Caribbean descent, Leidesdorff brought goods, capital, and vision. He built the city's first hotel, first shipping warehouse, and launched its first steamboat service. Each project stitched another layer of permanence into a frontier town still finding its identity. Strategically, Strategically, he became a Mexican citizen, securing a staggering 35,000-acre land grant. When the United States claimed California, his political standing soared. He was appointed an American diplomat and served on the city's first council. Then fate struck. In 1848, months before gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, Leidesdorff died suddenly at just 38. His estate, valued at over $1 million in mid-19th century terms, would today be worth tens of millions. While his heirs fought over the fortune, 2,000 miles away, another man was designing something far rarer than a personal empire, an entire black economy. The hum of Greenwood wasn't just the sound of commerce, it was the sound of defiance. At the center of it all stood O.W. Gurley, a man with a radical plan for the early 1900s: create a thriving black community from the ground up. He bought 40 acres of land in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and refused to sell to anyone but black families. From that seed grew Greenwood District, a self-contained economy with banks, hotels, theaters, shops, and restaurants. Gurley wasn't just a landlord, he was a financier, a builder, and a believer in economic self-sufficiency. He extended loans to entrepreneurs turned away by white-owned banks. In Greenwood, money circulated for weeks before ever leaving the community, a model of wealth retention rarely seen then or now. By modern standards, Gurley's fortune reached into the millions. But the true wealth was collective: 35 blocks of black excellence and autonomy. That autonomy became a target. In 1921, fueled by racist hysteria, a white mob looted, burned, and bombed Greenwood, killing hundreds and leaving thousands homeless. Gurley fled to Los Angeles, his fortune in ruins. What he built was destroyed in days, but it remains proof of what could be achieved when a community owned its power. And while Gurley's empire burned, another form of black influence was rising in the marble chambers of Washington. Blanche Kelso Bruce began life enslaved, yet carried himself like a man born for the corridors of power. During the Civil War, he escaped to freedom and set his sights on something few dared dream: political leadership in a post-slavery America. Settling in Mississippi during Reconstruction, Bruce invested in land and built a reputation as a savvy businessman. But his ambitions stretched far beyond business. In 1874, he was elected to the United States Senate, becoming the first African American to serve a full term. In an era when black political influence was fragile, Bruce was a master tactician. He championed civil rights, education, and economic opportunity. Later, as Register of the Treasury, his signature appeared on U.S. currency, a powerful symbol of progress in an age still hostile to it. His personal wealth was modest compared to industrial tycoons, but he invested wisely in land, stocks, and his family's future. His son, Roscoe Conkling Bruce, graduated from Harvard and shaped education policy, securing the Bruce name among the black elite. While Bruce navigated politics, other families built their fortunes on something older than elections: heritage and exclusivity. Behind the polished doors of St. Louis's grandest homes lay a world few outsiders knew, a network of wealthy black families whose influence stretched back generations. Many traced their roots to free people of color who secured land and trades in the early 1800s. Over decades, as St. Louis boomed, those holdings multiplied in value. They reinvested in real estate, mastered skilled trades, and passed both money and discipline to their heirs. This was not an open club. Admission came through birthright, reinforced by arranged marriages, private social clubs, and formal debutante events. Education was paramount. Children attended elite schools, sometimes alongside white aristocrats. Writer Cyprian Clamorgan captured this hidden society in his 1858 book, The Colored Aristocracy of St. Louis, documenting families who owned entire city blocks. Among them, the Pelagis became legendary for their real estate empire. But even the most fortified fortunes were vulnerable. Beyond their parlors, a nation hostile to black prosperity was preparing to dismantle what they had built. White dynasties like the Rockefellers and Carnegies had trusts, legal protections, and industries shielded by government influence. Black dynasties had none of these safeguards. Some fortunes were wiped out violently, like O.W. Gurley's Greenwood Empire. Others eroded slowly through predatory lawsuits, discriminatory taxes, and systemic exclusion from capital markets. Annie Turnbow Malone's empire crumbled under legal and financial pressure. William Leidesdorff's estate was tied up in endless litigation until almost nothing remained. Even when money survived, it was often fractured across numerous heirs. Segregation restricted reinvestment options, and racist barriers in banking and law kept opportunities closed. The brilliance that created these fortunes could not always protect them from a system designed to keep them fragile. But their influence, their ideas, their institutions endured beyond the balance sheets. The money faded, the mansions changed hands. But the legacies, those could not be erased. James Forten's fortune fueled abolitionist movements that shifted the moral compass of a nation. Robert Reed Church's bank gave Memphis's black entrepreneurs the capital they needed to rise. Madam C.J. Walker's millions funded the NAACP and the Harlem Renaissance. These pioneers left more than wealth. They left blueprints. They proved that vision, courage, and relentless execution could carve dynasties out of stone, even when that stone was hurled against them. Today's black billionaires, Robert F. Smith, David Stewart, Oprah Winfrey, walk paths first cleared by these early titans. Their names, Forten, Church, Hamilton, Gloucester, Malone, Walker, Leidesdorff, Gurley, Bruce, belong beside Carnegie, Morgan, Rockefeller. Because this is not a side note in history. This is history, and it proves that true wealth is measured not just in currency, but in the power to change the world. These names aren't relics, they're foundations. Their walls may have fallen, but their blueprints still stand. Every fortune in this story was built under conditions designed to make it impossible. Yet here they are, echoing through time. And in building them, these men and women created something greater than wealth. They created possibility. James Forten's battlefield loyalty, Jeremiah G. Hamilton's fearless cunning, O.W. Gurley's vision for a self-sustaining economy, Madam C.J. Walker's unstoppable drive. Each story is a proof of concept. That vision, risk, and defiance can carve dynasties out of stone. Dynasties don't appear by accident. They're forged in strategy, in sacrifice, in an unshakable belief that the future can be claimed. So the question remains, which of these legacies will history choose to remember, and which will be forgotten? Let us know in the comments section below, and if you want more of these hidden histories, stories of power, luxury, and legacy, subscribe, turn on notifications, and get ready for our next deep dive. Because the past isn't gone, it's a map, and the greatest fortunes are yet to be written.